morning, everyone. People are still checking in, I guess. Let's wait another few seconds. Yeah, good morning. I'm today in Riga. It's a more or less typical November day. Sun is hiding. Yeah, somewhere on the way to winter, but not yet there. 32 people and still people checking in. But I think it's now 3 minutes. Let's go. So, good morning, everyone. Labrit. And I welcome you all. We have actually a great registration turnout. Let's see how it turns out, the turnout in real terms. I welcome you all online here in wherever you are. And I also welcome very dearly Oliver Moody, who is author of Baltic, the Future of Europe, and also the Times correspondent for Germany and North Europe. He will introduce himself a little bit in a second. And it's actually busy times, busy week. On Tuesday, we had the groundbreaking ceremony of the ammunition plant in Lithuania, which already or soon to be defense industry gigant Rheinmetall is building up in cooperation with Lithuanian partners. The turnout at the ceremony was impressive. We had the president there, the prime minister, the finance minister, the economic minister, and all security advisors, and also Mr. Pappberger himself. And Deutsche Welle even made a live broadcast, CNN style, from the groundbreaking. But I think it's also fair because it is a historic kind of moment to build up resilience and defense power of the NATO eastern flank. And therefore, we are also very proud to be part of that as a German-Baltic Chamber of Commerce. And when I saw this book about 8 weeks ago in the book shop here in Riga, of course, the title caught my attention, but also the image, the title Titelbild, very interesting. And I immediately bought it, read it, and thought, that's interesting. I want to meet the author and share this with you. And yeah, sorry for this little postponing of a week. But yeah, Oliver, I think I throw the ball to you. Welcome once again, and I'm looking forward to the next 43 minutes of an hopefully a bit inspiring discussion with you, telling us about the book, but also discussing a bit and interactive style. Please, all participants, now we have 38, very nice turnout. Please use the opportunity and write in the chat, in the F&A or Q&A, if you have some questions, and we see how we can maybe answer them. Or yeah, welcome, Oliver.
Yes, good morning from Berlin, where it is uncharacteristically beautiful weather. There's this strange circle full of brightness in the sky. I suspect we won't be seeing that for another 5 months. Thank you, Florian, for the invitation. And as he mentioned, I should apologize for the delay to this webinar. I had to accompany one of my children in hospital last week, so we thought, all things considered, it was best to do it when there was a little less pressure. I am the Berlin bureau chief for the Times of London. That if you draw a triangle from Stavanger to Trieste to the Kola Peninsula, that triangle is roughly my area of responsibility. And I have been in the job since 2018, so long enough to second guess how Markus Söder is going to finish his sentences, and long enough to know how election cycles work. And my book, Baltic: The Future of Europe, or Conflicts on der Ostsee, as the German edition is called, came out is in this spring. And frankly, I suspect most of you will know a great deal more about some of the subjects in the book than I do. So I am not going to sit here and lecture you. I very much hope that this will be a conversation from which I learn something as well.
Let's kick it off. And Oliver, honestly, I got a bit angry when reading this book, because there is one thought in it which you must have stolen from me, because I used it like 4 years ago, opening a conference in Rostock, the Baltic Sea Business Days. And I was there on invitation of Minister President Manuela Schwesig as a moderator. And I had thought, with which kind of thought I can open the Baltic Sea Business Days in Rostock. And being an economist by training, I just calculated the trade volume, export-import, Germany has with all Baltic Sea neighboring countries, and found out that, damn, it's more than we do with China and US and Mexico together, or US and Canada together. And thought, hey, that's not really in everyday's mind present. And then I thought further on and went a bit higher up, and I tried to look the Baltic Sea region from very above, maybe 30 kilometers, and said, well, I think the Baltic Sea region is very important trade-wise for Germany. It's also super interconnected because of this sea that more connects than separates. It's probably the most democratic region still in the world, or at the moment. It's probably the most socialistic, or let's say UNDP Development Index, highest ranking, yeah, social welfare. It's most educated region in the world, and highly innovative. Lots of video games in the stock market of Stockholm. Yeah, and now it's what has been kind of overlooked sometimes, and certainly not in the center stage, is becoming now really center stage in geopolitics. And let's can you summarize your book in 5 minutes, please?
Well, you know, in the 17th century, Leibniz and the English mathematician and natural philosopher Isaac Newton independently invented differential calculus within a few years of each other. So I like to think that this observation about Germany's trade volume with the Baltic Sea countries is our modern equivalent of the Anglo-German serendipity. The book fundamentally is about three things. Number one, as a British person, but also as a British person living in Germany, I have been really sad about the depth of our two countries' ignorance about this part of the world, which not only has all of the human capital advantages and the economic advantages that Florian just described, but is also extremely like-minded, home to some of the closest and most reliable allies and friends that we have on this planet, and bloody interesting. There is so much wealth of historical detail and drama and cultural richness that has been lost on both the British and the German public spheres that I really felt someone had to drag it back into the center stage. So that was the first thing. The second thing was if you try and find books on the region, you will get lots of things about Poland and Germany or the Baltic states or the Nordic countries and a ton of information on Russia. But outside the academic literature, there's almost nothing that looks at it as a region and explains how these countries fit together and how they have been shaped by the same historical and geographical factors. And it is, according to a lot of political science research, the most intensely networked region on the planet today. And this is an incredible success story of European integration if you consider what the geopolitical map of northeastern Europe looked like in 1989. And then the third thing is to argue that yes, it is NATO's point of greatest vulnerability, but we need to move beyond looking at it only as a military Achilles heel and start looking at the deep traditions and practices of resilience, yes, but also foreign policy, the way of dealing with technology and information that these countries have developed by virtue of where they are and what they have been through in history, and that they have an enormous amount that they can teach Western Europe and the wider West.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's let's dig into that. So, what did you find? And I think one of these chapters is the title is Resilience, and maybe that's what you're also pointing at, or that's the abstract description. But how do you build resilience? What kind of building blocks or puzzle pieces does it consist of? And then maybe since you are, I used the opportunity of you being an English gentleman living in Berlin. How does it compare to to German Berlin reality in your view?
Yeah, resilience is one of those many sloppily defined concepts that has become a buzzword in the past 3 or 4 years across Europe, but there's no real clear consensus on what we mean by it. And fundamentally, resilience is the ability for a society to keep functioning under some kind of stress. We talk about it a lot these days in terms of warfare, but it could just as easily be a natural disaster. In fact, a lot of the planning in the frontline states has revolved around natural disasters as the likeliest scenario where resilience would be called upon. And a lot of the discussion of resilience focuses on systems. People point to Finland's comprehensive security doctrine, for example, which we can talk about in a bit if you're interested in it. But let's just park that for a second. They talk about the public information that is available in Sweden or in Estonia. They talk about the various kind of medical exercises and drills that are conducted in Lithuania. But I think we should move one step further down the causal chain and start with people, because probably the biggest challenge that we now face in Western Europe is the public understanding of how existential and dangerous this moment is for us. And obviously, this understanding is very clear on the front line, and it's very obvious if you look at the statistics that the willingness to take up arms and fight for your country, the willingness to sanction very high defense spending as a proportion of GDP, the level of readiness in terms of things like bunkers and all of these defense strategies is significantly higher on the eastern flank, and then it declines the further west you go, crudely speaking. But in the 21st century, given all of the techniques of political warfare and sub-military warfare and actual kinetic warfare that we already see being deployed against us or against Ukraine on a daily and weekly basis, we need to start with the realization that every country in Europe is now a frontline state, and that we need to start planning accordingly. And that, I think, means that the people in positions of authority, whether that is political leaders or the people at the top of the military or even business leaders, need to be much, much more direct with the public about how serious this point in time is and what the stakes are. And when I look at Germany, I have to say that there is a huge amount of latent capacity for resilience that was built up during the Cold War. There was an enormous amount of civil defense planning that had to happen because Germany was a frontline state in those days. There are lots of strategy documents and policy papers gathering dust in the Federal Interior Ministry, archives, and so on. This is something where Germany has a real kind of muscle memory, I think, that is waiting to be reactivated. But what I think has been missing has been that level of directness from the political leadership about, why are we spending 3.5% of our GDP on defense and another 1.5% on security?
We it's a bit maybe going to if you for a second look to your own country, London, how are things there? Is it in which way is it different to the Zeitenwende and the execution of Zeitenwende in Germany, and maybe then in the context to the Baltics? Is UK struggling with the same kind of inertia and yeah, I don't know how I can say that. Change, pain of change.
The UK is in some ways in a better position than Germany in that there has always been a very well entrenched political consensus about Russia as a danger to our value system and to our allies. And there has always been consensus around the 2% NATO target. But in many other ways, the UK is in a significantly worse position. Our infrastructural resilience is worse than Germany's. Our non-nuclear, our conventional armed forces are in a much more poorly equipped condition. Our political leaders present what we have been doing in Ukraine and in Estonia and more broadly within NATO, almost as though it were an act of charity. We're doing it because we believe it's the right thing, rather than we are doing it because our own security is on the line. And so I think actually that in many ways, Germany, starting from much further back, has moved forward and overtaken the UK in terms of readiness for the challenges that we face in the 2020s. And also the other thing to mention is the fiscal position. The reason why Germany has been able to increase its defense budget so dramatically, and it is unbelievably dramatic. I think it's going to be 152 billion euros in 2029.
Basically, it's even, I spoke to the state secretary. It's basically open. There is no ceiling. They basically can spend as much as needed because they have this, there is a formula in built, but naja. Okay, the other question is like then how to spend and how to get this innovation, which is so rapid. And I mean, this new doctrine, which your military, and there I think you have a point. It used to be 40-40-20, and now it's going to be 80-20. Yeah. So 40 tanks, 40 artillery, 20 something else air, and now it's going to be 80% drones and 20% conventional. So that uh, is very illustrative, and that's what we are also here very busy in the Baltics, testing drones, building factories for photo sensors, for other sensors, for putting the stuff together. And that's amazing what here the Latvian, Estonian, Lithuanians do. Even with in the schools, yeah, they train, start with drone races. I mean, in a kind of game way, and but it goes on, and this spirit here is great. And of course, from day one, very strong links to Ukrainian friends, and a lot of solidarity and strong ties. And in Latvia, we have this first testing ground, NATO testing ground for loitering ammunition in Celia Open. There's, yeah, I think there's a room for another triangle: Germany, Baltic States, Ukraine, when it comes to not only building the eastern flank and the drone wall, but yeah, helping NATO and Germany to get this innovation translated into the brigade at the end. So and I will stop with a question, but I also want to invite everyone on the 25th of November to Vilnius, where we're going to discuss all this and meet with about 200 decision makers of the defense industry of Germany, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Ukraine. I have also 5 delegations from Germany coming, the Estonian defense minister, and my colleague from AHK Ukraine. So there's still like 10 tickets left. You can see. So it is one of the questions you raise in the book is how to win a war against Russia. I was almost shocked, but I thought interesting. I want to read that. Oliver, can you summarize and share with the audience, how do I win a war against Russia?
I mean, you say you're shocked by that statement, but that is what deterrence is, right? Fundamentally, the ability to not just to fight a war, but to win it. And I think it reminds me a bit of the shock in the German public sphere when Boris Pistorius famously used that term kriegstüchtig. But of course, it's just a kind of logical extrapolation of what the defense sector is there to do, right? How do we win a war with Russia? We don't know what is in NATO's regional defense plan for the central region that covers Baltic Sea, but we have a pretty good idea of the general outline. And one of the absolutely critical elements that is only now starting to be talked about in the frontline states, although you very seldom hear about it in places like Germany and Britain, is that it would involve taking the fight to Russia on its own territory. This is the reason, I think, why so many of Germany's Taurus missiles have been held in reserve. It is the reason why Finland and Poland have acquired the JASSM cruise missiles and the JASSM extended range ones more recently. It's the reason why so many of the frontline states have been buying HIMARS rocket artillery, while Poland has invested so heavily in artillery, while Finland has maintained the largest complement of artillery of any armed forces within the European Union. It is absolutely as clear as day that a huge element of deterrence is that were Russia to be foolish enough to risk attacking NATO, it would have to deal with an absolutely intense bombardment of military targets on its own soil. The other element that I think is not appreciated widely enough by the public, but probably is by many of the people listening to this who will have more knowledge and more developed opinions about this than I do, is the importance of sustainment and logistics and the sequencing of how you get the people and the equipment where they need to be at the right time. And this is something where we still have a lot of work to do. There has been a lot of kind of political level work done on so-called military corridors of military mobility. But in terms of the pure infrastructure, it is shocking to me, for example, how few railway routes there are that can carry heavy defense material from Germany to Poland, just across the rivers Neisse or Oder. And this is something, and I'm sure many of the people listening will also be very well acquainted with the Rail Baltica saga, and indeed with the much wider problems with rail infrastructure across the Nordic region as well, which could be a very serious hindrance in the event of a serious conflict with Russia. And so I think this is another thing that would be an absolutely decisive factor if there were to be a NATO-Russia war, that where we really, really need to do a lot more work.
In this context, wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't it not make sense to move much more equipment already east? And why not? I mean, we have now a German brigade. Why not have a UK brigade and a Canadian brigade?
Well, there is a Canadian brigade, but it's a light brigade. I think there are about 2,000 Canadian soldiers in the 12 or 13 nation multinational brigade. It's not going to be full strength. I think it's going to, they've stood up pretty quickly, but I think it's only going to be about 3,500 personnel in total, whereas the German brigade at Rukla is a full brigade. And I think Germany has not had enough credit for what a really not just symbolic, but militarily significant measure that is. And the simple reason why there is not a British brigade in Estonia is because our army barely consists of 70,000 soldiers. And the Estonians publicly say they're perfectly happy to have just a battalion strength deployment there. They're not. But the reality is that the British military insists it just simply cannot spare any more soldiers. And it is probably correct.
Okay. That's, I mean, these are some harsh realities. Now, thanks for sharing a bit about this Russia, yeah, situation and maybe tactics. The book talks about also hybrid war, and that's something I mean, we are facing here every day. And this hybrid war term is used. It comes probably from 20 years ago. I'm not so happy with it because yeah, I think underestimates or puts it like a bit in the IT sphere, yeah, like a hybrid meeting or something. And I wonder, I would translate it more with a total war than hybrid war, although that also is kind of wrong. But what I want to emphasize is actually that there is this whole dimension, there's a whole new dimension, and it's not just what they call cyber as a new sphere of defense, but when you think about it, it's actually weaponization of everything, yeah, ranging from drinking water. I mean, sabotage has been around, but that you can do it remotely with IT kind of things, up to emotions of people, yeah, in the information sphere. And I have feeling that the public is still too naive and not yet used to deal with this kind of influence. Yeah, and we had now in Latvia this thing about the Istanbul Convention, and it smells so much of. Doesn't matter where it coming from, but it is something that is a discussion that is dividing the nation, yeah, and emotionalizing the nation, and it creates this sense of not unity, whereas what we need is actually unity. Yeah? And it's so tricky to fall in this trap. And yeah, what is your take on that, especially if you observe Germany and the Baltic? I always thought actually that in the Baltic societies is a bit more resilient in this one, but this Istanbul Convention thing showed that yeah, there is vulnerability.
Yeah, I also dislike the term hybrid war. It's actually a Western concept. It's not a Russian
Mm,
concept at all. And it, as much as it is a Russian concept, it is their way of conceptualizing what they think the West has been doing to them.
mm,
Um, I'm not sure total war is the right term because in English that implies something like World War II, where
yeah.
the entirety of a society and an economy's resources are being mobilized for a war, a kinetic war with no
Mm,
reservations. Um, I like your Mark Galeotti term there, the weaponization of everything. He has another term, political warfare, that is quite good for describing a lot of things you've been talking about. The term I eventually arrived at in the book was sub-military warfare,
mm,
which I think works as a way of describing how the Russian regime theorizes its struggle with NATO. That it is basically pursuing every single axis of warfare that it can below the
mm,
kinetic level. In terms of the defenses against the informational end of warfare, I am astonished by how little effort we collectively as the West still put into this.
mm,
Um, Latvia, strangely, given that it's been on the front line of this for 2 decades or more, and given that it hosts the NATO Center of Excellence for Strategic Communications, has until very recently had a very, very weak set of policies for dealing with informational resilience, which I find absolutely bizarre. And I share your suspicion that the vote on the Istanbul Convention has an awful lot of Russian interference in the background, even if only in the kind of social media debate that has shaped what the political parties feel they can do. Um, we know that you can have informational hygiene education, that it works, because Finland has been doing it for more than a century. But crucially, Estonia borrowed a lot of the policies and strategies from Finland from the 1990s onwards, and now has one of the highest media literacy levels in the world. So you know that, okay, it will take time, it might take a decade or two, but you can plant this healthy skepticism, this more robust way of dealing with information, especially on social media, and that it will take root and flourish. And I can only wish that other European countries would do what the
mm,
Estonians have done there.
mm. Maybe if we dwell a little bit on this hybrid or war thingy, and you said, yeah, in case of a real war, what would we do? We would carry the war into Russia. Uh, why are we not doing this more in the hybrid sphere already? Or is there so much stuff ongoing which we just don't know and not aware of? But since you did a lot of deep research, maybe you have seen what is your take on that? And I remember in a conversation with Lech Walesa about a year ago in Warsaw, we had, and he said his biggest regret is that he couldn't solve the Russia problem in the 90s, but Madeleine Albright kind of forbid him because he was ready to bring Solidarność movement and unrest into Russia. But at that time, the nukes were not yet secured, and he was kind of forbidden to do that. And he regrets it, although he understands why. But he said, guys, wake up, and we have to do more inside Russia and actually do what they do to us. And then, interestingly, you said that it was actually what Russia thinks the West has been doing. Yesterday, I read an article. Title was "The West used to play dirty." now, now, and does it have to relearn it to play dirty again? I mean, sometimes I have the feeling Russia is playing all kinds of different things under the table, above the table, through the back door, and then poisoning the air and whatever. Yeah, and we still keep to the law and order kind of thing, and that is difficult, I think, then to win. How is your take on that?
I'd start with this metaphor that we have of the escalation ladder. The One of the interviews I did during the research for the book that has stuck in my memory the most was with Fabian Hoffmann, who is a missile and missile defense expert from Germany, but based at Oslo University, who said that if you go back into the archives from the Cold War era and look at the deliberations at the highest levels in Britain and the US and what we were able to see of the Soviet Union before the access to the records was shut off, you see that they threatened to use nuclear weapons routinely, that they were entirely comfortable with this language and this kind of almost codified dance of escalation, and that it was almost like a game that had fairly clear implicit rules where you would go two steps up and the other side would eventually think, okay, shit, maybe they're really serious and back down. And that was a whole system of logic that has almost entirely died in the West since 1990. It does survive in parts of the strategic establishments, particularly in the US and in Britain to a lesser extent, but it's mostly gone. And it's certainly gone from our kind of public understanding of how you handle escalation. But it survived in Russia. And I often think that when the Putin regime is escalating along these various axes, it must feel as though it's playing an old game with a partner who doesn't even realize that they're playing a game and has no idea what the rules are. And I think this is something that we need to learn to rediscover collectively as NATO, and it has to be done as NATO. You can't do it unilaterally on a country by country basis. And another thing that I think we need to get more comfortable with is horizontal escalation management. So we tend to compartmentalize the different axes of hybrid warfare into issue by issue. You know, is it drones? Is it misinformation? Is it maritime sabotage? But we need to recognize that these are parts of an organic whole, and that just as the Russians will turn up the escalation in one bit and then dial it down in another, we can do that too. And that our response to a drone incursion doesn't necessarily have to be in the drone sphere. It could be in the cyber sphere, or it could be in the political sphere, for example.
I mean, you've answered it, but only very minimalistically. So I'll put the question again. Uh, should the West play more dirty on Russia? Yes or no?
I think so. Yes.
How?
Well, we have been remarkably reticent in the cyberspace. There is probably a lot of activity going on that never reaches the public domain. But given how much of escalation is about signaling and public communication, I think there is certainly a great deal of scope for being much more open and assertive about how we as the West conduct cyber operations in Russia. Yulia Navalnaya recently published a piece in The Economist arguing that the West should be much more aggressive in terms of supporting the Russian opposition and helping
Yeah.
it to establish a platform. I have deep reservations about large parts of the Russian opposition and the extent to which its goals really align with ours. But certainly, in terms of political interference, there is a great deal more that could be done in terms of particularly encouraging separatist sentiment in those peripheral regions of Russia whose populations have been plundered most gravely to feed the mobilization machine that Putin has deployed in Ukraine. So I think there are certainly ways of fighting dirty that we haven't really explored yet that we should look at.
Yeah. Well, our audience has been quiet. I don't know. Either it's very interesting what we say, or they're, I don't know, doing other
They've heard it all
things.
before.
Yeah, or they heard it all before, or they read all the book. Um, so yeah, we are coming, almost reaching the finish line. We have cleared how to win the war with Russia. We have cleared that we play more dirty for sure. We have to learn from Finland. We have sisu. We have to say this word, sisu, as this mindset. I think there's a lot of psychology also, this readiness and this resilience, readiness to say, yeah, I'm ready to defend myself, my country, my Heimat. Yeah, maybe it's time. Last question. I mean, the elephant, or better, the panda as elephant. So we always discuss about Russia, and I'm asking myself. I mean, okay, how to solve the Russia problem, how to win the war with Russia? Yeah, that's obvious. But isn't the problem? Isn't maybe that's the wrong problem? I mean, do we have a Russia problem or do we have a China problem? Because yeah, if China wouldn't support and be backing, I think we'd already be in a total different stage, on a different yeah, and Russia wouldn't be definitely in a different stage. And so, and isn't that the strategic aim that basically China plays the long game of and is happy that Europe has to divert instead of 1,000 billion for fixing the energy prices, innovation in AI. I think ultimately we are having an AI race going on. And yeah, and now we are putting it into ammunition and artillery, which is kind of low tech last century. Yeah.
I I think we have a Russia problem and a China problem, and the China problem is much deeper and broader and more long term than just its support for the Putin regime. But I'm under no illusions about the leverage that we collectively as Europeans have over Xi Jinping. I don't think there is any tool we have at our disposal that we could use to peel him away from Putin. I think that idea is for the birds. And so we have to deal with Russia. And again, I'm not convinced we can solve, in inverted commas, the Russia problem either. I've just been reading this very good new book called Das Versagen
Mm,
by Katja Gloger and
mm,
Georg Maskolo,
mm,
which is all about, it's a sort of investigative report into the last 25 to 30 years of German Russia policy. And what you see over and over again is this desire to try and stabilize and crystallize the relationship once and for all, and to reach some kind of sustainable equilibrium where everyone will know where they are and we'll all live happily ever after. And one thing that really stands out in that book is the psychological inability to live with a unstable threat on your doorstep.
mm,
But that ability does exist. The Baltic states and Finland and Poland have developed it over decades, if not centuries. And I think we need to learn the rest of us need to learn to live with the fact that Russia is going to be Russia for the foreseeable future, unless it suffers some absolutely cataclysmic defeat in Ukraine.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for today. Thank you for your book. It's an awful lot of work you put into it. I reading it, I really say a lot of respect. Yeah, you really talk to everybody that, and really I think is very necessary book. It's necessary because Germany need to learn a bit, and need to learn so it can also just copy. We don't need to reinvent. It's important because we just have to do it. We have to do it now, not later, now. And we have to do it fast and even faster, I would say. So go to the bookshop, get the book today, start reading, and then implement. And we, yeah, let us know, Oliver, when you're next coming to the region. We will welcome you and have a cup of tea and a coffee or whatever. It's been a pleasure having you today. We wish you success, and yeah, let's all work together so we will win the war without ever having to shoot. But that's, of course, when only possible if we are ready to and prepare to do all this.
Well,
Last words for you.
thank you for
There
being
are some
such a great.
questions.
I've just seen there are actually some great questions that have popped up.
You
But I don't know if we have
wanna do
time
some
to.
extra time? I have time till 10 more minutes, so that's
Yeah,
no problem for
should we
me.
do that? Yeah.
Then just yeah, pick up. Have you got one particular one you wanna answer?
I'll try and answer as many as I can as quickly as possible. So, Dominic Otto,
Yeah.
from all the countries you have described in the book, which one impressed or surprised you the most? The easy answer is that Finland impressed me the most. The one that surprised me the most was probably Lithuania, both in terms of the economic dynamism. I don't think that the rest of Europe has really grasped what an incredible success story is underway there, but also the kind of incredible bravery that its political elite has demonstrated on the kind of global foreign policy stage.
Mhm.
Arvid Petri, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. What is your take on the influence of the Trump presidency on NATO's resolve? I was tremendously pessimistic until about 3 weeks ago. I think that even the ambiguous statements about Article 5 are enough to very severely undermine the political component of deterrence. And I was very worried about Elbridge Colby's Global Force Posture Review and the prospect that American forces could be withdrawn from Poland and the Baltic states. From what I understand, the Trump administration is now trying to stabilize that. It has pulled the battalion out of Romania, but the mood music around the Colby Review is getting a lot more cautiously optimistic, shall we say. And I think we're now entering a transitional phase where the Europeans are going to have to get used to the US functioning as a backstop, where we'll get the nuclear umbrella, we'll get the intelligence support, but we may not necessarily get American troops turning up to fight in an emergency. And that is now the place that we need to get to. We need to be able to take that on. Evaldas Doudonis from Sarainen, what do you see the role of Ukraine for the future of the Baltics? I mean, absolutely crucial, as you can see by the sheer proportion of their GDP that they have donated to Ukraine. They haven't done that as an act of charity or goodwill. They've done that out of hard, calculated interest because they know that this is the most effective way that they can spend money on their own security. And that's it.
Genius. Brilliant. I mean, what strikes me about Finland is that they're so ready, but they're also so relaxed and so self-confident. and that the president, Mr. Stubb, so brilliantly I mean, being a triathlete, being super fit, and uh, but really knowing his game, and they never kind of relaxed this muscle. Yeah, I mean, Berlin had it all, and that you also mentioned it. Like I was born in West Berlin, 500 meters away from the wall, and I had Saturday morning. I was usually woken up at 6:30 by GIs because the McNair barracks were a kilometer away, and their jogging route was like passing our house, and then they were singing this what you see in this Vietnam movies, this "Whoa," and then ha ha ha, and then yeah, then, you wake up, yeah, because kind of and that I was 15 years old at that time. So, and then it completely changed, yeah. And we thought the world will be peace and happy and hippie, and yeah, that's not happening. Yeah. Yeah, true. Lithuania economic growth overtook Estonia in 2019 already. So Estonia was always leading, and then yeah, they caught up, absolutely right. And we have highest per capita and highest. By the way, Germany highest FDI in Lithuania, also per capita. Yeah, and yeah, thanks everyone. I think let's wrap it up, and hope to see you all in Vilnius on the 25th of November. And Oliver, hope to see you in Berlin or in Tallinn, Riga, or Vilnius. Let me know, let us know. Thanks so much for sharing. All the best for your children and healthiness, very important. And all the best, a successful rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Recht vielen Dank, alles Gute.
Alles Gute. Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao.